Greenfield from Phnom Penh, Cambodia, the city where Kristin and Susan spent a big chunk of their lives raising Caleb and Emma in the slums of Cambodia. So they arrived here in the 90s, a time when the nation was really just emerging from the devastation of the Khmer Rouge. In fact, there were still pockets of Khmer Rouge in different parts of the country kidnapping people. And Kristin and Susan arrived here to make a life and work with the servants team in Phnom Penh. So together with the rest of the servants team, they began to work with a local hospital, a hopelessly corrupt local hospital, all while living in some of the most challenging slum conditions amongst urban poor Cambodians and alongside their poor neighbours. One of the stories that stands out from Kristin and Susan's time was when Kristin was part of a protest driving in a truck around Wat Phnom to protest against corruption. And Kristin and his cohorts were actually arrested by the Cambodian police. And this story just demonstrates Kristin's passion for justice. In fact, one day they came home and their little thatch house had been actually swept away down the river. These were the kind of challenges that they faced with a lot of grit and a lot of courage and a lot of grace. But no matter what they faced, you could guarantee that Kristin would be spending a lot of time in thought and in prayer, grappling theologically, trying to understand the best approach to seeing change in a nation like Cambodia. And the fact that their faith really underpinned their lives in some ways kind of made sense to their Cambodian neighbours who knew them as Christian and Yesu, or Christian and Jesus, kind of the most Christian names that you could ever imagine. So when Nay and I arrived at the beginning of the year 2000, Kristin and Susan really took us under their wing, helped us to navigate the power cuts, the water cuts, the brutal injustice that was all around and just threatened to undermine us, along with a growing team of Cambodian staff as well. So the organization that emerged during that time was known as TASK, Angka Trodrong ng Apiwat Sokapip Nek Grey Gro. And at its peak it had 35 Cambodian staff, and they were reaching thousands and thousands of impoverished Cambodians in the areas around Chakngre and Chbampo and those slum areas around there, with medical services, midwifery, and even a brothel clinic. Those were the days in which Dr. Janet Cornwell, Susan, herself a doctor, Kristin, a nurse, and others who came before and after that were serving. And it was like a dream team as we were making such a difference in the slums in Phnom Penh. I remember we had all kinds of challenges though, conflicts. I remember a team debate about whether we should have cell phones. I remember the day when Kristin and Susan bought a tuk-tuk to get Caleb and Emma to and from school, and the Cambodians just thought it was so funny and so weird seeing a foreigner driving a tuk-tuk. So later, Kristin and I began to share the international leadership of servants. And that was the time when the three of us were serving together with Helen Sidebotham. Really an amazing mix of just very different personalities and styles. But again, it was like a dream team of leadership. And in those days, we just felt so blessed to be working together. What an amazing time to work together with Kristin. It was not all smooth sailing. TASK, after being localized, went in an unexpected direction. Helen passed away suddenly and tragically. But despite all of those sadnesses, the fruit of what Kristin achieved during those days still lives on today. I think of Pana, a young man that Kristin discipled, now leading a drug rehabilitation ministry here in Phnom Penh. I think of Vanta, another man that Kristin discipled, all through ups and downs, who's now a pastor in a Phnom Penh slum. And of course I think of myself. Kristin was my greatest mentor, the one who has influenced my thinking, my theology, my faith, my practice amongst the poor in so many ways to this day. And his legacy, Kristin, your legacy lives on today.
Kristin, we know your legacy will go on with all those you've invested your life into. Sue and Emma and Caleb, our biggest hugs and love to you both, all three of you. We know that God will welcome Kristin into his loving arms and will be telling him, welcome good and faithful servant.
Som praam patiempo.